We're joined by advocates for political and human rights, human dignity and social justice in South Africa, Mary de Haas. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Mary. Perhaps let's just start with GBVF cases. We believe that areas most affected was Plessis, Lar, Umlazi, Inanda, Empangeni, Eshowe, Matateni, Phoenix, Chatsworth. I can go on. Are there particular reasons why these areas are beset by this particular problem?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, look, don't forget we're talking big areas, so there will be proportionately more cases there. You know, the only way to make comparisons is to do it per 100,000 population. Global figures don't tell us much because if you look at Umlazi, Kumanshu, they've got very high, they've got very large populations. For example, Phoenix. I mean, these areas. So, I mean, it's a problem everywhere. And of course, don't forget that you know, some of the, especially sexual violence cases, are not necessarily reported. But I mean, that's been the way, you know, it's one of those crimes that tends to be underreported.
And are some of these crimes specific to gender? Because I want to find out if they, at some point, overlap. You know, are there opportunistic killings, for instance? We know, for instance, there is the issue of serial killings in particularly rural areas that we've seen in the province throughout time. Just give us a sense of how these three crimes interlock.
Look, I mean, in a community you may have different types of crimes, obviously. You may get gender-based violence, which goes together with gang killings, for example. I mean, we're a very violent society. We're abnormally violent, and there's too many guns. And I mean, children. You know, in rural areas. I mean, there's an area near Malmö's up the north coast where, in the last 3 years, about 20-odd people have just been killed at night for no apparent reason. You know, men come in with guns and kill people. And, I mean, there was in the Mantuba area, there was a massacre of women and children just a couple of months back now. And the home was razed, and nobody knows why. I mean, it's so difficult to, you know, a lot of the areas, and it's not only urban areas, I mean, it's more noticeable, obviously. You know, a lot of this crime is fueled by organized crime, drug dealing. And then, you know, not only does that give rise to competition among drug dealers, but it gives rise also to other crime because people get hooked on drugs and they steal, they engage in other crimes to feed their drug habit. So there is this interlinking, but I mean, it's not just guns that kill people, but there are far, far too many guns around because it makes it easier to kill people.
And that's the thing,
you know, people get killed by strangling and stabbing as well. So, yeah.
And that's the thing, Mary, you know, some of these crimes, do they occur, as I asked, because there's a motive, or are they opportunistic? As you mentioned, there are various types of crimes that lead to murders, and some are not necessarily gender specific. I mean, we're showing pictures of Sindusumagaqa. Some are obviously said to be political, some are said to be driven by a fight for routes between rival taxi owners or groups. And we know there's Abahlali baseMjondolo who accused police of complicity in the killing of their members, and simply because they are questioning and bringing to light the corruption that they accuse those in the legislature and benefiting from the housing scheme. So does it become clear at some point, or is it just mired in the whole violence of society?
Look, there's a lot of allegations of collusion with police. that people often don't trust the local police because they say that it's a particular problem of taxi violence, as you correctly say. Taxi violence is a major problem, and that is linked to, and don't forget, taxis also supply most of the hitmen. There's a lot of unregistered security companies that should not be happening, especially guarding taxis. And access to guns. And as I said to you, it's well known that the taxi industry supplies a lot of the hitmen. The use of hitmen in killings makes it much more difficult to solve the crime because the hitmen disappear, they get whisked off somewhere, there's no DNA from hitmen that are standing there firing at you with a gun. So the taxi industry is a major driver of that type of crime. And that gets back, and often there are political and police interests in taxis. Often there's a lack of political will to regulate the taxi industry properly. And the taxi industry, they attack buses. You saw that Cape Judgment. They attack buses in KZN. So, and they get away with it because there's so many political interests, and some of the local police have interests. And people often don't trust the police. I mean, the crux of this whole thing you're asking about basically is what's happened to policing in this country. I don't think people realize just what a crisis is in policing. Right from the top to the bottom. That is the crux of the problem. I'm dealing with a situation in which, right across the country, competent, decent police dismissed simply because they don't go along with corruption.
And the knock-on effect.
So we talk about crime. We should be looking at one of the driving forces is the extremely bad management of policing, not employing the right people in top positions, top-heavy, and ministerial interference, including in all these political killings. You've got to look at these factors. That is the crux of the matter, that we've got people running the police who are not competent to do so.
You're right.
And that's why we don't have enough feet on the ground. There's too many generals. We're paying far too much for top-heavy police instead of people on the ground. We're employing too many people who are friends, relatives, lovers, not properly trained in the police. So, if you're talking crime, you start, and detectives, I mean, the ministerial team is completely lacking in transparency. No minister should be involved in overseeing political killings. So, all of these things are interlinked in terms of policing, and I deal with a lot of ordinary, decent police who are risking their lives. They're not acknowledged. They can get dismissed for saying, well, why does this new guy that's come in who's a VIP protection man without qualifications, why is he suddenly a captain or a colonel, and I've been sitting here as a sergeant for 10 years? I mean, you can't believe what policing problems there are in this place. It's not getting nearly enough attention.
Yeah. Mary, it's such a pity we've run out of time. I was keen to hear about the domino effect then on the criminal justice system as a totality, but I'm sure we'll get a chance to speak to you at another time. Mary Haas is advocate, activist for political human rights, human dignity and social justice in South Africa.